foster family, we have 10 pets. They are 3 Westies, Saffron, Belle and Beau, 5 tortoises, Herbie and Bernadette, Amy and Sheldon and Penny, and we have the 2 rabbits who are Poppy and Daisy. And the fact that there is several dogs I find really helps, because we've got several children and everybody can have a cuddle at the same time and everybody can get that attention really. The children that we've had and young people that we've had have often spent more time with the dogs initially, because you can have a chat if you want to chat, you don't get quizzed, you don't get asked anything, and they're just lovely company. So this is what we call the den, and it's our semi-independent room, but this goes down really well. It's got its own entrance, it's got its own set of rules. It is somewhere to practice being independent but safely. We're all in the house, they've got access to the house all the time. I've got a key for the den as well, so it's still one home, but this is a separate area for privacy. We've got rooms in the house for younger, under 16-year-olds. This is probably my favourite and most important thing, and it's our welcome book. So we don't really discuss this book, it's just left on the child's bed and in their own time they just go through it. But what is so important to me, because it introduces our family, there's photographs of everybody that's in our house and a little bit about them as well, what things they like, how old they are. And I think that it's, in the early days, it can be so daunting, and it's like, who am I with? And it's actually really nice to have a little bit of an explanation, and they also can create talking points. Because food and meals are such a high anxiety area for nearly all of the children that we've had, I like them to know what's coming, and I like them to be able to plan and not worry about their evening meals. So we have a Monday to Friday system, and on Sunday I'll plan out what we're going to have, and they simply just tick their name if they want it. And I have found that since we've introduced this system, I'm not getting asked at breakfast what's for tea, because children were obviously concerned, they were asking the question, and it's there, they open it up, and it's really lovely because spaghetti bolognese always goes down really well, and on Sunday you can hear the little whispers, I can't wait till Wednesday. Before a new foster child comes to join our family, it is an anxious time, but I would say it's more exciting than anything else, and we've got a lot of trust in the county council for matching us to the right placement. So before that child arrives, we don't question, are they right for us, because we're confident that they will be. I would say to people thinking about fostering to ring the local authority and ask as many questions as you can. When I tell people I'm a foster carer, a lot of people immediately say, I've thought about that, or I want to do that, and haven't. And I'll always question, well, why did you not make that call, or why did you stop? And it's often a fear that could be just, I don't know what the word is. it could just be resolved so quickly, and sometimes just asking questions and makes you realise that the things you're worried about aren't really there, or you can speak to somebody that's experienced it and gone through it, and have come out the other side and think, actually no, it is a really rewarding thing to do. I can't see myself doing anything different.
Yep, we're live, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So welcome to this afternoon's Finance and Major Contracts Committee. It's being held remotely for obvious reasons. It's also being broadcast on YouTube, so welcome to anyone who's watching us on there. My name is Richard Jackson. I'm the chair of the committee. With us today are Roger Jackson and John Ogle, who are the two vice chairs. Councillor Keith Girling, Councillor Tom Hollis, Councillor John Clark, Councillor Eric Kerry, Councillor Diana Meal, Councillor Mike Pringle, Councillor Alan Rhodes, and Councillor Gordon Wheeler. We also have a number of officers in attendance, and we'll introduce them as they speak in the committee. So I'll move on to agenda item number 1, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of November. I'll move those minutes.
Hold on a second, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. And unless there's any dissent, can I take those as read? We don't need to do a formal vote. Okay, so we've approved those minutes, and I'll move on to any apologies for absence. I don't believe there are any. Is that correct, Pete?
Correct, Chair. We have no apologies for absence.
Okay, thank you. So welcome to everybody. And item 3 is declarations of interest by members or officers. I don't see anybody indicating to speak, so we'll take that there are no declarations of interest. Item 4 then is the financial monitoring report for period 6, which you have in the agenda pack in front of you. I'll ask the service director, Nigel Stevenson, if he would introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. As I mentioned last time, colleagues, adjustments have been made to committee budgets to reflect the costs for responding to COVID-19 based on the last Delta return to government. As a consequence, we now show the council forecast outturn in one table rather than 2 as in previous reports. Table 1 then on page 4 indicates the council's anticipated forecast outturn is an underspend of 2.5 million. The significant variances in children's and young people's and personnel committees are set out in the report. Again, it's been one of the more interesting years for monitoring the in-year financial spend. And the council continues to monitor the impacts of COVID-19 on its finances, especially over the coming months, and work will continue to confirm both the COVID-19 and non-COVID-19 related costs as we also take the appropriate management action to address these. Turning to the capital programme, Table 3 on page 7 sets out the expected variation of the capital programme of only 400,000, and there's one minor variation to the capital programme reflecting additional Section 106 monies, and that's set out in the report. And as usual, this report updates members on Treasury management activities. Thank you, Chairman.
You're on mute, Richard.
Are you muted, Richard? Sorry.
Apologies. There's always one, isn't there? I've got Councillor Tom Hollis indicating to speak. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm on a different device today, which is not used before. So
we can.
Fabulous. So I'd just like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak. Our recent council report to the Government and Ethics Committee revealed that a decision to lend £28 million from prudential borrowing to build and spruce up buildings tipped the council over the half a billion debt figure. Whilst not quite in the same league as Nottingham City Council, it's not a competition, Mr. Chairman. The report by auditors Grant Thornton shows that this authority owed £403.5 million to the Public Works Loans Board and £95 million to other creditors. The council have also committed to borrowing a further £28 million for new buildings and sprucing up others. This brings your total borrowing to £526.5 million. I also note a refusal of the Government and Ethics Committee to give further details on these or itemise the projects it was spent on. Instead, it was recommended that we go through 40 years of statements of accounts, something which we've now done, yet the statement of accounts do not contain any of these details. It is crucial in terms of transparency that the council itemise our £403.5 million debt to the Public Works Board and the £95 million to other creditors so that we can be assured that we are getting good value for money, Mr. Chairman. Does the Chairman agree with me that raising raising debt is a concern, and would you, Mr. Chairman, back the Ashfield Independent's call for the information to be put in the public domain? And I'm referring to paragraph 44 there, Mr. Chairman, of this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'm sure Nigel can pick up on some of the detail on that. All of the information that's required to be in the public domain is. We have regular Treasury management reports to this committee. We are required to approve our capital programme every year as part of the budget process, which we do. It is all available. I'm sure officers can help me to find whatever you can't see, but it is all there. Nigel, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And thank you for your question, Councillor Hollis. I think at Governance and Ethics Committee, there was a bit of a slight confusion between what is looking at historical information and the request in terms of how 500 billion of debt could have been raised. And as I said, a lot of it would have been a considerable long time ago, 40, in some cases 30 or 40 years ago, and a lot of it would have been spent on roads and schools. The question I think that would have been more relevant at the committee would be to ask what had been raised and spent in the actual year, which relates to the accounts that were under question. As Councillor Hollis may be aware, is the Public Loans Board is the cheapest form of borrowing, and therefore the obtaining value for money in terms of its borrowing requirements, it would be right and appropriate to borrow from the Public Loans Board. But that doesn't mean that there aren't cheaper options out there, and that's why the Municipal Bond Agency that was set up a few years ago, we've opted, I think it was a report a couple of months ago to this committee about our option to maybe take a bond if that was necessary. But luckily enough for us, at the spending review, the Chancellor has dropped the Public Loans Board. So again, I think that probably would be the cheapest option. Turning to the spend, though, about whether that's value for money, again, that would have to be taken a decision year by year by the council, and it'd be wrong for me to comment about whether a capital programme that was undertaken in 1970s offered us value for money or not, because it would have been purely in agreement by the council at the time.
Thank you, Nigel. I should add as well that any business case that comes forward that requires capital spending is determined by the good that capital spend will do, and everything needs to be value for money. I've got Mike Pringle, Councillor Mike Pringle, please, next.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to say we recognise the efforts of the finance team as ever during this period, and just reflect on Councillor Hollis's comments. I think from our group's point of view, we asked the right questions at that time, understanding the difficulty that we're in, but recognise, that there's different ways of doing things, and looking over 40 years, I'm not sure that detail would have been paramount today. However relevant it is, I understand that, Tom, but I do appreciate the efforts of the finance team that come at the minute, and I think, to be honest, any direct questions that I've had to Nigel, Keith, or any of the team are being responded to sooner rather than later, to be quite honest. So thank you for the report.
Thank you, Mike, and appreciate your comments. Can't see anybody else indicating to speak. I'll formally move the recommendations, which are on page 17.
Formally second, Chairman.
Thank you, John. And we will do a named vote on this one. So, Pete, do you want to take us through a vote?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So I'll read names out in alphabetical order. Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Girling.
For.
Councillor Hollis.
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Jackson.
For.
Councillor Roger Jackson. Councillor Kerry.
For.
Councillor Neal. For. Yeah. Councillor Ogle.
For.
Councillor Pringle.
For.
Councillor Rhodes.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you, Pete. Diana, you were muted. It did look like
Yeah,
four with a
four.
lip reading. Is that correct? Did you nod? Okay.
Yes,
thank
sorry
you.
about that. Didn't hit
Thank
the-
you. No, didn't want to get your vote wrong. Okay, so I'll move on to agenda item 5, which is the budget update report. And again, I'll ask Nigel to introduce this.
Thank you again, Chairman. May I start by saying that this year has been one of the more challenging of years from the monitoring of finances point of view. The response to the pandemic has come with it estimates of costs, the uncertainty of funding, the duration of the pandemic, and the constant desire for us all to understand not only the impact on our finances in year, but also upon that for the future. Never before have I so wished for the crystal ball or a visit to someone with the skill and knows how to use one. As we have progressed through the year, I have been updating members on the anticipated impacts on our finances in year, and last July I updated colleagues on the latest view on the MTFS. This was based on a number of assumptions on costs and loss of income in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, the level of funding that was known, and the early view on impacts on the Council's future year's finances. It was anticipated then that there would be a net overspend in this year of 4.3 million, which would limit our ability to offset issues next year. The issue of the shortfall in government funding and the overspend would result in a consequential use of 10.8 million of reserves needed to balance this year's budget. Future years would require funding the anticipated loss on the collection fund and a translation of this also in a reduction in our tax base. A very early estimate of the impact of COVID demand on our services next year was estimated at £15 million, and we had not taken an assessment of future years. Consequently, the medium-term financial strategy then indicated a funding gap of 26 million next year, and the gap over the MTFS increasing by 23 million to stand at nearly over 51 million. In producing this report, I noted in it that there have been a number of changes, namely additional government funding for COVID-19 costs and lost income, further specific burdens and funding, including infection control grants, home to school transport grants, test and trace and contained management, to name a few. Announcements were also made on the provision of PPE, which reduced cost estimates, and other cost estimates for the impact of COVID-19 have reduced. In-year overspending becoming an overspend, and a pressures and inflation review was completed, and completed a harder review of reserves and identified options. Colleagues will recall that the assumption in the medium-term financial strategy last February was the council tax would increase in each year of the MTFS by a maximum before a referendum of 1.99%, although every year the council will need to decide on council tax increases. This update to the MTFS indicates that the shortfall for next year is anticipated to be 8.7 million, with savings plans required of 50 million over the next 3 years. As before, this report notes a number of key events that were or are still to occur that would have significant impacts upon our assumptions and therefore the MTFS, namely the spending review announcement, the provisional then the final local government settlement, final council tax and business rates deficits and tax base numbers, updates on cost drivers to some of our identified pressures, such as the number of children looked after and the national living wage, and the exit pathway from responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. One of those events, the Chancellor's spending review announcement, was last Wednesday, and from that announcement we learnt that the baseline funding will continue for at least next year. The council tax referendum threshold will remain at 1.99%. It was proposed an additional adult social care precept of up to 3%, with an option to defer some of that to a future year. 300 million of additional grant for adults and children's social care, half is temporary, and there would be an equalisation process on its distribution model. A scheme to compensate councils for 75% of irrecoverable loss of council tax and business rates revenues in this year. Sales fees and charges compensation scheme will be extended into the first 3 months of next year. £1.55 billion will be set aside to compensate for COVID-19 in 2021-22, and PPE would be extended. There would be a continuation of the Troubled Families Programme. New homes bonus would continue for a further year, and small business rates multiplier would be frozen in 21-22, and local authorities would be compensated. The fundamental review of the business rates retention system will report in spring next year, and the well expected reset of business rates baseline next year would be postponed. And also announced was the new national living wage be set at a lower than predicted figure of £8.91 per hour. These headlines will impact upon the medium-term financial strategy as it's reported to committee today. Namely, that support to council tax and business rates deficits and the potential for some support to the tax base offers an option to reduce and draw upon our reserves. Pay restraint next year offers the potential to reduce the additional pressures next year upon pay and may signal restraint over the medium-term financial strategy. The national living wage announcement was lower than we anticipated and will lower the additional pressure identified next year. And the additional adult social care precept offers an option to close the funding gap and protect services. There is a signal that the government will continue to support councils through the beginning of next year as a pathway out of COVID-19 is established. In February, this committee will receive a further update on the medium-term financial strategy, whereupon the MTFS will be rolled forward for a further year, giving an MTFS of 4 years to 2025. As mentioned earlier, the spending review announcement was one of the key events that has now occurred, and further events are yet to unfold before the council can determine the budget for next year. And we should remember that is a 1-year spending review, not a 3-year comprehensive spending review, and that we're still responding to COVID-19, and consequently it's still a moving picture. And I think I probably need to buy a new and improved crystal ball. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you very much, Nigel. And can I thank you and your team for all the work that's gone on into producing this report and all the work that goes on to balance our budget. I also thank you and the Chief Executive for the work that you do through your own professional organisations and a great deal of lobbying that's gone on by yourselves and at a political level by our team as well. I think we are being listened to by government. I said this at the meeting earlier this month, and I repeat it today because there's a lot to welcome in the spending review from Wednesday, and it certainly puts us in a better picture, and I think gives us a bit more confidence as to what the future holds for us financially. So I'll formally move the recommendations, which are on page 26.
Formally second, Chairman.
Thank you, John. I've got Councillor Hollis and then Councillor Pringle. So Tom first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's the Tom and Mike show, isn't it, really, asking the questions? But no, I do thank you for bringing me in. And it's a very simple, short question, really, for Nigel. Obviously, we took this decision earlier with regards to developers. We've obviously just been made aware of the large financial gap of nearly 51 million. What impact has the postponing of Section 106 payments had on the short-term finances for the council? Thank you.
Okay, Nigel, it's a straightforward question.
Yeah, it is, and it's a very good question. In terms of balancing the capital programme, we do have the school's placement funding, and it's normally what tends to happen, Councillor Hollis, is that we tend to end up being able to use the money that's been allocated to us in grant from central government to offset any delay in receipt of the Section 106 monies. So it's a timing issue. It doesn't really tend to then have a problem to us in terms of our bottom line, in terms of our budget.
Okay, thank you for that, Nigel. Tom, are you happy with the answer? Okay, so Councillor Pringle, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, the crystal ball scenario is frightening to me. I completely agree with what you said in regards to the team, the finance team, and the effort they put in. We all recognise that. There's no question about that. And as I said previously, the responses to any question come back directly. So, really understand that. But to you, Chairman, after Wednesday, the Chancellor's speech on Wednesday, how are you going to change, or what you're putting in place in regards to adult social care, the investment, the financial service provision. These are things that still, paragraph 25 highlights delays in options for being able to make decisions. If anything goes wrong, we can't look back on the crystal ball. So I'd be looking for something more firm in delivering on this paper from yourself, if you can, Councillor Jackson. Give us an idea, and I've asked you this several times in the past. Give us an idea as to where you're going with adult social care and the 3% now that we know is coming forward, or the investment, or the final the finances for service provision. Let us know where we're going, because at the minute I'm sticking my finger in there and feeling which way the wind's blowing at the minute with it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. And we are close to being able to publish a budget. Clearly, the biggest unknown still on the horizon is the spending announcements due probably in the week before Christmas. And I think that once that's in place, we'll be able to discuss exactly what next year's budget will look like. But I mean, everything that we've heard over the course of the last sort of 6 weeks or so in terms of announcements from government has been positive for us, and I think it gives us a lot more confidence about next year's budget. But for the final detail, I'm afraid it's just a wait a few more weeks now, and we'll be able to discuss that in much greater detail. I've got Councillor Alan Rhodes, please. Alan.
Sorry, just to mute myself. Yes, I mean, really, my question was similar to Mike's, and that is, well, what's the plan? I hear what you've just said, that it seems to me that you're working on it, but the fear is, of course, that we could end up with local taxpayers paying for the shortfall in paying for the coronavirus costs rather than central government. And it will be interesting to see what you decide to do on council tax and the social care precept. There is a multi-million-pound gap for the next administration, whoever that is, to pick up. And obviously we're all interested, Richard, in what your plans going forward are. Not the with due respect to Nigel, not the plans of the officers and of the finance directors, but what the plans of the political group running this council are in to address this problem.
Thank you, Alan. I mean, what I can say is that the working assumption up until last Wednesday and the spending review announcement was that there wasn't going to be an adult social care precept. It wasn't announced until that spending review. And so we had the outlines of a budget which we believed funded adult social care sufficiently for next year. Obviously, we're still in an unknown position with the pandemic crisis, and so there is work to be done over the next few weeks to just bottom that out, because clearly we need to make sure we can fund that service properly. But I think for now, and until we've got the final figures in the local government funding settlement later in the month, later next month rather, we're not going to know for certain. But as I say, I just can repeat that we're increasingly confident on the shape of next year's budget. We've got Councillor Hollis again, Tom.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, that's a legacy hand. I'll put that down.
Okay, no problem at all. Thank you. Unless there's anybody else wanting to speak, I've been proposed in second, so can we take a vote, please, Pete?
Yep, thank you, Chair, and I'll read out names in alphabetical order as before. Councillor Clark.
Abstain.
Councillor Girling.
For.
Councillor Hollis.
Abstain.
Councillor Richard Jackson.
For.
Councillor Roger Jackson.
For.
Councillor Kerry.
For.
Councillor Meal.
Abstain.
Councillor Ogle.
For.
Councillor Pringle.
Sorry, 4 Pete. I couldn't get my mic off then.
All right, that's 4. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Rhodes.
Abstain.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Yep, that's carried, Chair.
Pete, sorry, Chairman, sorry, I wanted to abstain on that paper. Sorry, not for. Sorry, Peter. Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, that's still carried by a majority vote, Chair.
Right, thank you very much indeed. So we'll move on to item 6, which is Hucknall Town Centre Improvement Scheme Capital Variation. Anyone that's been through Hucknall recently will know what a great job has been done with the Town Centre Improvement Scheme. The road's up and running. This tidies up the final finances on the scheme. I would just remind members this is a report about the capital variations rather than about the merits or otherwise of the scheme itself, which I happen to think is an excellent scheme, even if it was about 50 years overdue. I'll move the recommendation.
Foreman, second, Chairman.
Well done, Roger.
Thank you very much
It's
indeed.
not working right.
We have Mike Barrett on the meeting with us. Mike is Team Manager in Major Projects and Improvements, and he can just introduce the report. Mike.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so as Chairman stated, it's a report to approve a variation to the capital programme. For those of you who know Hucknall, the scheme was split into two parts. The first part was the new road, which is called Torcard Way and open to traffic. That was the largest element of the scheme. But what it did, it enabled the high street to be pedestrianised. And that was out to achieve some of the key objectives that was set out in the business case. When we did a post-opening project evaluation a year after, it concluded that those had largely been met. The funding package for the scheme at the time of construction was 13.433 million. And as part of that, the key element was a Department for Transport contribution, which was paid as a capital grant, which as part of that grant required the County Council to underwrite any costs overrun of the scheme. As a value for money, when we did the cost and benefit analysis for the scheme, we were at 7.82, which indicated a very high value for money scheme. The final outturns costs are included in paragraph 14 of the report, and they were largely down to ground conditions encountered by working in a town centre environment. As part of the works, there was a number of land that had to be acquired for this scheme. Some of this has been bought historically. I think something back to the 1970s were the earliest ones we purchased at this one. But on confirmation of the order, there were 6 plots outstanding. 3 of these terms have been recently agreed within this current calendar year, hence we're bringing the report at this stage. In addition to the land acquisition, under Part 1 of the Land Compensation Act, people who own or occupy property that is reduced in value as a result of the new road can claim for compensation. The factors are listed in paragraph 21. It's worth noting that claims under this compensation, Part 1 claims, can be made at any point up until November 2023. The finance implications are detailed from paragraph 28 onwards, but an additional funding of 677,000 is required over and above the 33,000 of external funding that's remained unallocated, and that's mainly made up of completion of the land acquisitions that have been agreed and need completing of 225,000, completion of some cladding works at the bus link of 40,000, and our estimate of 445,000 for Part 1 claims. They are proposed to be split over the forthcoming financial years to allow the fact that claims can be made up until 2023. In addition, I reference that properties have been purchased for quite a few years now. These are detailed in paragraph 32. And the original cost of those acquisitions were taken into account as part of the County Council's contribution to the schemes, but those are actual or expected returns that have been completed since the scheme has been opened and we could dispose of those properties. So whilst the additional costs were largely incurred during construction, the assumptions for land and compensations were pretty much in line with those at the original scheme estimate stage. And the additional costs have been largely offset by the returns that were made from the sales of properties that we'd bought in the first place. The proposed funding profile is set out in a table in paragraph 40, and happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mike. I can't see anybody indicate. Oh, I can. Diana. You're muted, Diana.
gosh, eventually I'll get the hang of this. A good report in the sense that a very important piece of work in terms of improving Hucknall Town Centre. My query, however, is that this is a large amount of resources and large relative to the total cost of the scheme to suddenly be put before us as an additional cost. And I just wondered if we, on schemes like this that are taking a huge amount of our resources and borrowing, whether we should have more incremental notice of the likelihood of increased costs as we go through these schemes, and thereby be given some alternatives that we could look at to try and reduce costs or improve the scheme itself. It seems like we've got almost to the end, and then we're being asked, you know, for another £700,000 without much flexibility in terms of how we can query that or change that. So really, that's my question, and obviously that's a question that goes towards other schemes that we might be involved in, like, for example, the Nottinghamshire Improvement Programme.
Yes, thank you, Diana. That makes perfect sense. Mike, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mill, for your comments. I think it's a fair point, and it's one of the things we're looking at as part of the governance structure of major schemes moving forward, ensuring that both through communities in place and this committee that we bring updates what are relevant and timely in order to support those decisions and actions if necessary.
Okay, thank you.
And I think this has potentially kind of slipped between the gap, if you like, Diana, in that it was completed 2016. I think ongoing projects which are in train, I think we have as a committee had reports more regularly and almost in real time when costs are appearing to overrun. This was finished sort of before that regime, if you like, and this is a sort of sweeping up exercise afterwards. But I take your point, and certainly we'll aim to bring things forward much sooner than that. Derek, you've indicated, is it on that point?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it was on that point, Councillor Muir. Just to follow up on your question and Mike's answer, and actually the Chairman's response as well. It was simply to say that I think what we can see here is a slight difference in approach to the way that we report highways capital projects, and particularly our construction capital projects that we deliver through ARC. Members of this committee will be very familiar with the ongoing progress reports that we bring to this committee around the schools that we're building and other kind of construction related activity. So there's probably a piece of work for us to do in line with the Chairman's comments to kind of bring that reporting approach in line, both for highways and our building construction work in future. As Mike and the Chairman said, I think this is probably a bit of a legacy project in that respect, but there is something for us to do just to tie up future reporting on highways construction activity, and hopefully as we bring projects like the GAR to this committee in terms of progress reports, you'll be able to see that we're on that journey of aligning reporting.
Great. Thank you, Derek. That's helpful. Thank you, Diane. Councillor Hollis, Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to really welcome this wholeheartedly on behalf of the district councillors in Hucknall. This funding has significantly aided regeneration efforts in Hucknall. Hucknall is probably the fastest growing town in Nottinghamshire. This will only get worse with the forthcoming garden village at Topwigay Farm. Ashfield District Council have been delighted in contributing £1.35 million to this £13.5 million project. Doesn't it just go to show, Mr. Chairman, that Ashfield District Council, Nottinghamshire Council and the Department of Transport working together, we can deliver results that really we can see changing residents' lives and businesses, Mr. Chairman. So sometimes many hands make light work. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And I think at some stage in the future, it's probably for the Place Committee rather than for us, but a report into the economic benefits to Hucknall as a town once this has settled down, maybe 5 years from completion. Let's get the current crisis out of the way, but it will show, I'm sure it'll show what great value for money it's been. Okay, so if there is, Derek, I've got your hand. Is that just a legacy?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and now I've got Councillor Pringle as well, Mike.
Thanks, Chairman. Just going back to Councillor Mill's question and in particular Derek's follow-up, we recognise the legacy that comes through, but we are in a financial difficult situation. So I would expect professionally to be aware of projects moving forward and the funding that therefore is going to be required, and not just expect to read that we need another 700k this next month when we have a next meeting. So in following up what Derek said, are we saying now that we will be able to do that with all, whether the legacy or whether the new projects that's going forward?
Yeah, I think I can say that's what I expect to see. I think as a committee,
Okay,
can't speak for everybody, but I think we all would expect to see that going forward. So yes, I can certainly say that, Mike.
Yeah, good. Thank you. I support you with that one, then, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rhodes, Alan.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, I mean we've always recognised the importance of this scheme, and of course, under my administration, we worked very closely with the then Labour administration at Ashfield District Council, who were prepared to put that funding in that's reported in the funding package on paragraph 9, and we always recognise the, as I've just said, the importance of this scheme with the house building on the previous site owned by Rolls-Royce, the new school building and the highways infrastructure that was opened during our time. And so, you know, whilst I share the concerns of Mike and Diana in respect to the funding, there is no doubt that this is a scheme that deserves our support because we can see the huge benefits for the town of Hucknall. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. And of course, I mean, as Mike said in introducing it, the sale of the properties, some of which we'd owned for more than 40 years in Hucknall, has almost offset the additional costs that we're asking for today. So I can't see anybody else indicating. Can we take this to a vote then, please, Pete?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Girling.
For.
Councillor Hollis.
4.
Councillor Richard Jackson.
4.
Councillor Roger Jackson.
4.
Councillor Kerry.
4.
Councillor Meal.
4.
Councillor Ogle.
4.
Councillor Pringle.
A definite 4, Peter.
Thank you, Councillor Pringle. Councillor Rhodes.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
4.
That is carried, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so that's unanimous. Thank you all very much. And on to agenda item 7, which is an update on procurement and contract management. And I think we've got Kaj on the meeting.
Yes, afternoon, Chairman. Thank
Welcome.
you.
If you'd like to introduce the report, please, Kaj.
Thank you. So this report provides members with an update on the Council's procurement strategy and the update on the contract management approach. So I'll start with procurement. In December 2019, the Policy Committee approved the Council's procurement strategy for 2019-2023. This sets out the framework for procurement, but also a real drive of building on our procurement journey and driving added value for residents in Nottinghamshire and through our external spend. We've done a lot of work on putting targets into our strategy around social value, particularly around local spend and SME spend through our contracts, and the table at the bottom of paragraph 6 outlines where we are to date on that delivery. So we're above target already, and we'll continue to ensure we track this going forward. In terms of contract management, an audit was undertaken in March 2019, which outlined some work that needed to take place on a corporate approach to contract management. I then brought a paper to Finance and Major Contracts Committee and agreed that we'd develop a corporate contract management framework and a supporting toolkit. So just wanted to provide members with an update on that. So in the summer last year, we developed a cross-departmental practitioner group with contracting leads from each department. We've had really good success, albeit with a slight pause around the work on COVID wave 1 in the spring. But delighted to inform members that an interactive toolkit was developed, and this went live in October 2020. Appendix 1 provides the screenshot, but I'd be happy to do a screen share and show you a live demo of the toolkit if that would be helpful. The practitioner group will continue to meet quarterly and work on best practice and contract management issues. And like procurement, we're also developing a training program for both procurement and contract management. So that's an e-learning tool module to increase the awareness and capability and skills of both procurement and officers across the council, as well as contract managers, and that work's well underway. I also like to just point out that we're not forgetting the link that strategic commissioning plays within procurement and contract management, and there's some work underway around developing a corporate approach to commissioning, and I'll bring a further report to committee once that works further along. But happy to take any questions or comments from anyone at this stage.
Thank you, Kaj, and thanks for the report. It's always good to see when we are exceeding targets, and it always makes me think we need to put your targets up a little bit. So we'll have a conversation about that. But I think as well to put all this in place during a year when you have been up against it in terms of procurement, particularly around PPE, which we're all well aware of. Particularly congratulations to the team for achieving this. I'll move the recommendations, which are on page 56.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, John, and I'll ask for any questions or comments on the paper. Mike, Councillor Pringle.
Thanks, Chair. And just to recognise the effort that Kaj has put in, again, she's been a great officer when she's, I think, one of our assets when she came to Notts County Council, both with her outlook and her approachability. So, you know, well done for this report. Are you staying on for the remainder of the meeting?
Yes, yes, I will.
Okay, that's okay. I'll try and catch up with you a little bit later on if I can. But the report is great. Thank you for that. Let's hope that you don't have to continue going through the year that you've had, and that you can actually get your teeth stuck into something relative to NCC.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's helpful. I can't see anybody else indicating. There was an offer to show us this on screen. What I'd suggest is if anyone wants to see this, I'm sure Kajal, somebody could do a one-to-one and just talk members through it rather than doing it on the committee's time this afternoon. So with that, I'll ask Pete to take a vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Girling.
For.
Councillor Hollis. Councillor Hollis, can you hear me?
He's on mute.
You're on mute. I'll come back to Councillor Hollis. Councillor Richard Jackson.
For.
Councillor Roger Jackson.
For.
Councillor Kerry.
For.
Councillor Meal.
For.
Councillor Ogle.
For.
Councillor Pringle.
For.
Councillor Rhodes.
For.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
And Councillor Hollis, can you hear me? Councillor Hollis. Well, Chair, even without Councillor Hollis's vote, that is
okay.
Carried.
It clearly wouldn't change that. Thank you very much, Pete. I'll move on then to item 8, which is the COVID-19 cultural service contract variations. Just draw members' attention to the fact that there's an excluded part of this report later on the agenda. It might be that we want to discuss the whole thing then, but we'll try and discuss as much as possible in the public part of the meeting though. So are there any questions that don't involve exempt information? Councillor Rhodes Allen.
Muted. Sorry, I'll get the hang of it soon as well. Yes, there are. I've got several concerns about all of this. The comments I make will refer purely to items that are identified in the publicly available papers. I'm finding it difficult, if not impossible, to support the proposals here. And financial implications clearly states that monthly payments of £44,937 will need to be made for the first 3 months of 2021 for Parkwood, and £118,270 per month for the first 3 months of 2021 to Home Pierpont. And I'm at a loss as to why we should do that at a time when this council is in financial difficulty because of the cost of COVID. Every other business up and down the country has lost income as a result of this, and why we should be stepping forward to pay public money to commercial organisations that have signed a contract with this council to deliver a management service is beyond me. So I'm not persuaded by what's in the report, and it's a lot of public money that I don't believe should be paid. I've been to Rufford twice in these past 10 days, and it was packed on both days with people, full of people. The coffee shop was open, the garden centre was open. They were charging £4 on the admission fee, which I fully agree with. So I don't understand why revenue has fallen to the level that they claim it has. I accept that, and I did make this point to the Chief Executive in a conversation that I had with him on the afternoon of the morning after I'd been to Rufford. They were only taking card payments, but you wouldn't know that until you got to the booth. And if you just turned up for half an hour with the dog, you're not necessarily going to take your wallet with you. You might have got a £5 in your back pocket, but they weren't taking that. So my suspicion is that people were being let in for free anyway, which is no good way to run the business, in my opinion. And I did ask for the signage to be improved. When I went the next time, it was no different. So, you know, I'm not prepared to put my hand up for us to put our hands in our pockets for this. It's wrong. It doesn't feel right. If it doesn't feel right, it's wrong, obviously. And it's a lot of public money to be tipping up every 3 months, every 3 or 4 months. And so I'm not in favour of it, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask Derek to come in because I think Derek might be able to add something which will answer questions before members feel the need to ask them, if that makes sense. Derek, do you want to just comment on the loss of income across these two sites?
Certainly. I mean, the report itself covers off in big picture terms some of the issues, and I understand members' concerns. What we've seen, if I take Rufford first, and then perhaps touch on the National Water Sports Centre or Home Pierpont. At Rufford, during lockdown, the first lockdown, what we saw was a facility that was in large part closed. So the facility wasn't generating any income either from car parking or its commercial activities. And that, whilst there has been a significant recovery, certainly in visitor numbers over recent months, and particularly over the summer, we have had, and the operator has had, a significant number of operating restrictions on its commercial activity, which has resulted in long-term costs to the business. And the site is certainly not operating in a profitable way in the current year. Rufford and Parkwood are, of course, delivering on the council's behalf a public service that has a significant amount of value, particularly at the moment as people look to find ways to spend time out in the open during the latest lockdown. And it is the case, as Councillor Rose has said, that the site has been very busy. And we mentioned that in the report. Actually, the visitor numbers have been higher than in usual normal years. And I think that's a positive reflection of the way that our partners there, Parkwood have managed to keep things going in difficult circumstances. What hasn't happened, though, is that income has been able to keep pace with the volume of visitors because of the kind of trading and commercial restrictions that we're all familiar with, particularly around hospitality and so on. The costs outlined in the report represent, we think, a reasonable means of ensuring that we can continue to operate the site in conjunction with Parkwood, and we can also recognise the financial difficulties that have been faced by Parkwood in delivering the services that we're asking them to deliver. I would also say that at both Rufford and Home Pierpont, both sites and both contracts require open book accounting, so we are able to examine the costs and confirm the costs that either Parkwood Leisure or Serco Leisure present to us. So from an officer perspective, we are comfortable with the costs that have been presented to us. At Home Pierpont, the operating context is much more complex than it is for Rufford, where most visitors, you can see the offer that's in front of you. At Home Pierpont, the main income generating facilities are not car parking and catering sales as they are at Rufford, but a range of different offers. There's a hotel, there's a campsite, there's a range of outdoor activities, there's a big commercial gym, all of which have been shut or closed for the majority of the last 9 months. Home Pierpont is a much bigger commercial operation than Rufford as well, and a much more complex commercial operation, far more staff involved, or many more staff involved, and that's why the costs are concurrently larger, or consequently larger than they are at Rufford, because the nature of the operation is simply bigger, simply more complex, and many of the income sources that Home Pierpont relies upon are in large part kind of negligible, certainly for thus far this year, and are likely to be for the remainder of the year. The situation is exacerbated at Home Pierpont because of the fact that, even more so than at Rufford, where there are, whilst the operation at Rufford is seasonal, there are high points, if you like, at Christmas and so on, and during the school holidays. At the Water Sports Centre, during the winter time, the operation is slowed down in any case, but that is even further exacerbated by the current trading circumstances. So income for the remainder of the year is likely to be very, very low indeed at Home Pierpont, and that's why we're facing the kind of cost that we are. What the report mentions in both cases, but particularly for Home Pierpont, is that we're in active conversations with the site operators about how we might move to a much more minimum operating model, if you like, as we anticipate that the difficult circumstances at Home Pierpont are likely to continue into the new financial year, whereas at a site like Rufford, it's the nature of it means it'll be able to spring back to something approaching normality, whatever that might look like in the future, much more quickly than a site like Home Pierpont. So we are looking at how we can move to a much lower cost core operating model at Home Pierpont, and we're going to bring consideration of that and some recommendations around that to a forthcoming meeting of this committee for members to consider, because like members of the committee, we're concerned too about the kind of ongoing cost of the site. What I would say, just to kind of in closing, is a couple of other comments really. Both sites operate on relatively long-term contracts. In the case of Rufford, we operate the site with a 15-year contract with Parkwood. At Home Pierpont, we operate the site on a 21-year contract with Serco and the Home Pierpont Leisure Trust. So I would stress to members that it's worth seeing the current year's losses, if you like, and costs within the context of the long-term benefits to the council in financial terms that both contracts are generating. The average saving at Rufford over the last 3 years since the establishment of the contract back in 2017 is about £300,000 a year, and the average saving at Home Pierpont since the contract was established in 2013 is £900,000 a year, about 90% of the operating costs of the site when we were running it back in 2013. So over the life of the contract, both sites will save the council significant amount of revenue money, and both operators have actually done a lot of work to improve the facilities and improve the public offer on both sites as well. So in the overall context of things, these are absolutely difficult years, but they reflect, if you like, a moment within the life of the long-term contracts that will generate significant savings for the councils.
Thank you, Derek. You make a very good point. I've got a few hands. Alan, your hand is still up. Did you want to come back, or have you?
No, sorry, Richard. It was,
Thank you.
Error on my part.
Okay, so I've got Councillor Mike Pringle next. Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Nobody is challenging the effort that these companies have put in to where they are. But when the first application for funding support came in, I did raise what happens if another funding application comes in. And here we are again, potentially, if we go into another lockdown situation, looking for a third funding application. So I would not be doing my job if I wasn't questioning the amount of public finances that are going to these companies. If for me, paragraph 37, A and B, and reading them, as I'm sure everybody has, there has to be a balance in this report, and I can't see it for the protection of public funding. This simply attacks with a gun to the head, saying, actually, you know, if you don't support us, we're going to pull out and it's going to be your baby. That's not what we're about. Nobody has ever been in this situation before. So surely there should be some work together, but at the minute, I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing a loaded gun pointed at the head of the council, saying if you don't pay up, we could be taking action against your pulling out. That, for me, is quite disruptive and very, very disappointing.
Thank you, Mike. I think Derek covered a lot of that, Derek, in what you said in introducing this. Is there anything you want to come back on?
Just to say again, Councillor Springer, I completely understand your concerns. I think particularly in the case of Rufford, we know that the commercial model for a company like Parkwood is one that's very much based around its delivery of services on behalf of local authorities. That's broadly speaking what it does. And so Parkwood as a company in its commercial model relies very much on the support of local authorities. And I think it's fair to say that in the case of Parkwood, they would have found significant difficulty in continuing to trade as a business if local authorities like ourselves hadn't continued to provide ongoing and strengthened financial support over the current year, because they are a company that depends very much on local authority business. Serco, as everybody knows, are a larger entity and a significantly different commercial beast, but they are divided up into a range of different business units. And Serco Leisure is very much likewise a local authority provider and depends upon its relationships with local authorities for its continuing financial viability. So one of the things that we have sought to consider in our work with both Serco and in particular with Parkwood is to be appropriately challenging because we recognise the kind of difficulties that there are, but at the same time what we've been trying to do is to recognise the commercial realities that both companies have been faced with, given that the majority of their commercial relationships are with local authorities.
And you're comfortable, Derek, that both these companies are shouldering some of this burden as well? It's not all on us, is it?
Absolutely. I think it's worth saying that at both sites, despite the fact that there's been significant investment both from the council and from Serco and from Parkwood over the years, both companies are committed to long-term relationships with the council, and we see the fruits of that in the facilities. But at neither site have the financial performance of the facilities delivered upon the original ambitions of either Serco or Parkwood. So both sites have not met the company's commercial aspirations. So they've been, from their perspective, loss-making for a significant part of the contracts thus far. And so it isn't the case, and it's perhaps worth drawing members' attention to this, that both sites are profitable from either a Parkwood perspective or a Serco perspective. They're still engaged, like us, in an act of long-term faith that both sites will become profitable for them, because thus far they've been at best marginal for both Parkwood and for Serco.
Okay, thank you, Derek, for that. I've got Councillor Roger Jackson next. Roger.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I actually think, though, we need to look at these sites in a different value type of way, for measure it in different terms for people's social welfare and mental aspect. I mean, Alan did say, you know, Rufford was very busy when he went there, but these types of places, we need them in these times of lockdown and the tier system, so people can get out, have some exercise, get some fresh air, etc. So I think there's a monetary value there that we can't really judge financially with what these sites offer. And as long as Derek says they show some transparency in their accounts to us, and we can see what they spend and what they putting back into, and they are, say, having some of the burden on the losses as well. And the long-term aspects of them is that they will be a benefit to the council with these companies taking on both these parks. But I think at this moment in time, they are very important that we keep them open and available for people to go and use.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. You can see in the report, Rufford in particular is 50% up in terms of usage this year, which is incredible, but not too surprising, really. Keith Girling, Councillor Girling.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. I have some sympathy with Councillor Rhodes. Some of these amount of money is quite eye-watering, really, in terms of what we've been asked to endorse to give over to them. But I think what we can't lose sight of is the context of what would happen if we don't. Yep. If we don't support these businesses to keep them going, and the financial consequences that would have on us then by having to run it ourselves. And I think it was really interesting that Derek was replying in terms of the amount of profit they share with us when they get profit. Yeah, and it's like any partnership, I think, that if you're going to share the profit, sometimes you've got to share the loss. And I think and I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that you know, they are saving the council, were saving the council a substantial amount of money year on year. So I think in the round, I would support the recommendations. My question is, though, I don't know so much about Owen Pierpont, but I do know about Rufford, and I can't remember seeing Rufford apply for any of the government grants coming through Nottinghamshire District Council. So can you update me, Derek, please, on did they apply for the grants that they was entitled to, and were they successful, and how much they got, please? Because it doesn't say that within the report, I don't think, unless I missed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Girling. I don't have that information in front of me, so I'll dig it out with colleagues, and we'll come back to you on that.
Can I come back then? Because it really, that, you know, that's information that should have been taken into account in the amount of money they're asking for. Because if they are getting, I don't know, I think it was 25 grand the first amount of money that went out. If they got that 25 grand, has that been taken into account in the amount of money they're asking for now, for example? And I'd have rather have known that before making this decision. So that's just a point, really. Thank you.
I assume, Derek, in examining the books, the losses are, you're satisfied with the losses, and it's the detail of if they have had external support that would have been seen, even if you've not got the detail to hand.
Absolutely right. Yes, Chairman.
Okay.
That's the case. Both, as I say, Rufford and the Home Pierpont, we run open book accounting, so we're able to validate the costs that both businesses face. But I'll check, Councillor Girling, that if there has been an application of support to Nottinghamshire District Council, because I haven't got that information in front of me now.
Okay, thank you. It's a good point that you make, Keith. Did you want to come back?
Yes, please. Because the only point I'm making, it's great. I'm not going into it any more than that. But my concern would be if they haven't applied. yeah, and they're just looking at us as the cash cow to bail them out. So I would want to know that actually they did apply, and how successful they were really. And if they weren't successful, I can always do a bit of questioning back at that other authority that gives the money out. Yeah, it's more of an understanding of are they doing everything they can do to minimise the amount they're asking from us. Thank
Quite
you.
right. I mean, if you can leave it, Keith, to our discretion for Derek to have that conversation, because if they've applied and been unsuccessful, you know, disappointing, but at least they've applied. If there's anything they haven't applied for, if Derek's team can just ensure that they've maximised what they can apply for from whatever other funding sources might be available, I suspect that they have. But let's make sure we can see that and help them to apply for whatever's available if they haven't, before we actually, you know, effectively sign the cheque. But I think for sake of expedience, we do need to get this through this afternoon, because obviously we don't have another committee now for about 6-7 weeks with the Christmas break. Alan, you wanted to come back?
Yes, just very, very quickly to support what most of what you've just said, but certainly what Keith said earlier, which I think is very important, very helpful in going forward. I like use of the term cash cow. It's one that I've used as well.
And I do know from experience elsewhere, where there are arm's length companies and arrangements like this, councils haven't always been able to claim for lost income from government just because of the way that scheme was set up. So there may be something in that, but I'll give assurance now that we'll make sure that that's been maximised before this is finalised. Having said all that, it's been proposed and seconded. I can't see anybody else to speak. So Pete, would you take us through a vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Clark.
Against.
Councillor Girling.
For.
Councillor Hollis.
Against.
Councillor Richard Jackson.
For.
Councillor Roger Jackson.
For.
Councillor Kerry.
For.
Councillor Meal.
Against.
Councillor Ogle. Councillor Ogle, sorry, did I hear you vote?
For, if you can hear.
I can hear you now, thank you.
It keeps flickering off. I've never had a problem like this for months.
Oh,
Operator problem, I think.
I could hear you loud and clear anyway. Councillor Pringle.
Against.
Councillor Rhodes.
Against.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Yeah, that is carried, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 9 then is the work programme. Any questions, comments, additions? Okay, I don't think we need to take a vote on that one. If everyone is content with it, we'll record that. Then come to exclusion of public and press, which is item 10, which I'll propose.
Second, Chairman.
Unless there are any questions on excluding the public and press, do we formally have to vote on that, Pete?
You can just confirm if there are any abstentions or any voting against.
Okay.
I'm not hearing, so I'll take silence as
I can't see any.
as
Just for the record, I had a message on the chat function to say that Councillor Tom Hollis had got connection difficulties. I don't know whether he's back in the.
He was back, because he did vote in that on that last item.
Yeah, right. Thank you. I didn't register that. So in that case, then we've excluded the public and press.